Our third reflection from the life of King David means that I also get to talk about my favourite Bible character. Not only have I been able to talk about my favourite ministry of mentoring, but also I can talk about my favourite Bible character, who is Mephibosheth. And we find him, at least the part of the story that I want us to think about, in 2 Samuel chapter 9. So just to recap, the first empowering relationship or partnership, which I'm suggesting to you was a mark of David strengthening himself in God, was back in 1 Samuel 16 verse 13, and it was a surprising encounter with Samuel. The second relationship, which I described as very special, was the relationship with Jonathan in 1 Samuel chapter 18. And so here in 2 Samuel chapter 9, and particularly verse 7, we see an example of the relationship which David had with Mephibosheth. And I'm going to call this a saving relationship. So the first two types of relationships, the first one was about David resting in God, waiting on God, and being surprised by how he was found and anointed. The second one being about that network of relationships around him, for example, with Jonathan, that equipped him. And then this third relationship is a superb example, I think, of how then it fell to David to reach out. And he reached out and formed a relationship with Mephibosheth. Mephibosheth, as you may recall, was the son of Jonathan, the grandson of King Saul. And Mephibosheth had a pretty raw deal. He was dropped by his nursemaid when he was a young boy, and so he was lame in both feet. He didn't walk properly. And what we read of in 2 Samuel chapter 9 is that King David, reflecting on his life and his story, I suppose, was asking if there was anyone still left of the house of Saul for whom he could show kindness for Jonathan's sake. And he was told, yes, well, there is this guy called Mephibosheth, and he lives in this place called Lo-debar, from the house of Machir. So David sent for Mephibosheth. And when Mephibosheth was brought before him, this is what David said: "Don't be afraid, for I will surely show you kindness for the sake of your father Jonathan. I will restore to you all the land that belonged to your grandfather Saul, and you will always eat at my table." As a consequence of David having refreshed or strengthened himself in the Lord, he was then able to reach out to someone who he knew needed saving. Saving from his circumstances. He was, as I say, lame in both feet, and there will have been a stigma around that. Saving from his family history, in that as a member of a deposed king's family, he could have faced execution. And saving from social consequences and poverty, because the area which he lived in was a desert area. It was a wilderness. There was nothing growing there. And David was inviting Mephibosheth to come and live at the palace and to dine at his table. It was a saving relationship. And I believe that any walk with God is not just about us being secure in ourselves and being able to spend time with the Lord, as I said earlier, on a one-to-one basis. And it's not just about having a network of relationships around us that will help us to keep going and to stay on track. It's also about how we reach out. How does God, by his Spirit, equip us and challenge us to offer salvation to others as they get to know the love of God and the power of God and the difference that Jesus can make in their lives? This is fundamental, I believe, to our lives as Christians. And as David reached out, as he invited Mephibosheth from where he was to go on this journey to the palace. It's a powerful example of the mission that we all have before us if we choose to accept it, which is to reach out, to build relationships, to strengthen ourselves through reaching out. And in the reaching out, in the missional service that we embark on, we find ourselves strengthened in him. It most definitely isn't all about sitting there and receiving. There comes a point when we learn by doing. And the beauty of this relationship, of course, from Mephibosheth's point of view, was that the promise was that he was always eat at the king's table. And the image which I have in my mind is the fact that when you're sat at a table, people don't look at your feet. So all of Mephibosheth's stigma, his low self-esteem, his insecurity will have disappeared at the king's table because that wasn't noted. All that King David noted was that he wanted to show Mephibosheth kindness for the sake of Jonathan. And there's our challenge. Will we, as we are strengthened in God, as we're equipped in God, will we, through our relationships and partnerships, will we offer that salvation to others? God bless you, and I hope these reflections have been helpful.